let's talk about the resonance science number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we finished week 2 for module 2, Thinking Differently, for the Resonance Science Foundation course. I hope you're joining and taking the course as well. So this this module basically talks about all the people who have influenced science from the beginning of registered time by up until now. So all the big thinkers and influencers of science. And basically Western science too. That was the other kind of take.
It was Western science, but I think like the focus was all people who were against their current paradigm and who also had this underlying theme of their science where they thought that they kind of believed in ether. They believed that we were kind of all one. There was a little bit of like a holographic type notion all the way back to Plato and beyond or something. So so it was a good refresher.
Yeah.
It wasn't I wouldn't say that I learned anything new, but at the same time it was good. I mean, maybe I did learn a couple of new things. Like I had no idea. The one thing I wanted to focus on with this one was I had no idea that Isaac Newton was into alchemy. And
that's a big one.
And
that just came out recently.
And he was apparently very into alchemy, and it was the thing he had written about most. But he kind of held on to it post-mortemly because it was not accepted at the time. It was like a heresy to believe in such things or whatever. But so I have been trying to figure out how to get my hands on that material.
Yeah, it sounds like, well, I just did a little bit additional research because there was a 1-hour History Channel background information, about that part of Isaac Newton. But then I was like, let me just go see what else there is out there. And it sounds like some of his personal works were found and then sold to individual people that were able to buy it for whatever amount of money. So his writings on the alchemy side is not all of them are made public because of that.
Right. But I'm sure, I mean, that's changed hands even like who knows how many times now. So
right.
I need to dig a little bit further into that. And then I did actually see there was that movie Agora. Did you ever see that movie Agora? It was about it had Rachel Weisz in it, and she played the girl that they talked about in the Roman times who like died, who got like had a horrible death. And
she was like the only woman.
Hypatia or whatever.
Oh, Hypatia, maybe. Lady Anne. There was Lady Anne Conway. That wasn't her. There was another woman.
No, it was like Hypata. And she believed that there was one source to everything. So that's kind of interesting. That was one of her main philosophies that was taken away. So,
and they were, that was cool. Wait, sorry. Were you going to relate that back to Isaac Newton somehow?
No. I was just going to say this. She was another one that I kind of took note that I kind of liked. Because I've seen that movie even before this. And I was like,
so that
I didn't realize she was,
okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize she was a real person. So that was cool.
That was cool. Of course, she was like burned at the stake, I was like, she was a witch. She was a heretic. Burn her at the stake. She was a woman.
By a mob.
Oh, she was pulled apart. Yes, that's right. By a mob, right. A mob of monks. That's correct.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Actually, the thing that stuck with me, one of the most, besides Isaac Newton, this alchemy thing, was the music theory and how this Pythagorean theorem, I had studied the Pythagorean theorem, right? Everybody learns that in school. But then at some point, I was just like, well, all right, I got through my tests and really I'm not a math person. So that's basically what I used it for. But then there was this music theory. So it said music could be translated and described by mathematics, also propounded the theory of harmony of spheres, in which movement of the stars and planets are mathematical harmonic ratios, producing a symphony of musical tones. So there were a couple of thinkers like that really stood out for me, because I had this experience when I was in college, and of course I was like, smoking, and then whatever. I went to this concert. I went to a Rusted Roots concert. I don't know if you know Rusted Roots.
I do know Rusted Roots.
So I was at this concert, and I had, of course, an epiphany. I was like, music is the universal language and mathematics. It was like, boom, revelation, And in that moment, actually, it was funny because that was one of those moments where I was like, I know all the answers to the universe. And then I was like, but I'll never remember anything. And that's exactly what happened. But I did walk away with that. And I didn't realize that there was such a strong, I mean, I knew kind of mathematics and music are the universal languages, but not to that degree. So then when I read it again just now, I was like, oh yeah, that's true. That's like in kind of what I felt anyway at that time. But
what's interesting to me about music is that I've dated musicians, like, I have a lot of musicians in my family. I am very capable of picking up a guitar or a ukulele, and if I look and it's like, okay, play G, C, A and do this, I can strum it, I can play, but I can never create on an instrument. I can't like write my own songs or even if I like have a melody in my head that I could write, I can't find the chord. I can't match what's in my head with the instrument. Like it just, I don't know. It doesn't work like that for me. But what does really work better for me is like when you play those like garage band type video games, or where there's like in fact my friend sent me this other website called Pitchy or something, and it's you sing and it gives you a note and then you sing a note and you're trying to match it, and it will grade you based on like how accurate you are, but it has a visual component, so it'd be like do re mi fa sol la, and you can see the little graph and like exactly how long to keep each thing. So for me, when I have a visual like marker like that rather than actual notes, like when there's a little line I'm supposed to follow and keep my voice within that, or I could perform way better. So I think like having, when it talks about the mathematics of music and having like spherical elements to it, and even for me like being able to visualize what a chord looks like if I could actually see the resonance of something versus like if you could see something that's a bad chord or like something that's off, like if I could see what that looks like versus one that sounds like pretty pleasing to the ear, I think that would be more my learning style.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. We're such visual and audio learners nowadays, so it seems natural for that to be like a helpful learning style for you. Musical intelligence or visual intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So weird how that works. But I mean, I think with technology, we're probably going to get better and better at having it presented in different ways for different people to be able to understand differently. But yeah, I mean, like, I also find it interesting that every planet has a sound.
I know. I was just listening to this podcast the other day, and he was mentioning the podcast. He was saying about Saturn and how Saturn has like it constantly has a hexagonal storm at the bottom of Saturn.
Yeah.
Right. So, but he said
that with the hole in the center of that hexagon, which is kind of like the hole in its pole, which is
right. It's exactly. There's so much to learn about that, and it's like, why aren't we investigating that more? Anyway, but he was saying that they've recorded the sound of Saturn, and he's like, it's a horrible sound. He's like, if you don't listen to it, I was like, I know, that's weird.
For me, there was a year there where I was going to sleep every night with the sound of Jupiter. I love the sound that Jupiter makes. Like if you just type in like YouTube, and you say, just the sound Jupiter makes, or the sound any particular planet makes, it'll give you, sorry, I think my mic seems to be kind of like cutting in and out. It'll give you the sound that, what is that satellite? It's not Sputnik or whatever, but
I was saying
not Hubble. No, it's not Hubble. What is it? The one that like left our atmosphere. I don't. That famous satellite that went out of our solar system. It went around every planet like multiple times and recorded what they sounded like and sent the information back. So we know what every single planet sounds like, and you can and it has like, some of them are playing a song, basically. It's not just like, it's like, I mean, they all have like a little, range. So it'd be really interesting,
cool.
And see like what frequencies each of them are resonating.
Yeah, definitely. And I would love to know about planet Earth's sound.
Well, I guess that's what our Schumann resonance is.
Well,
right?
that's what I was wondering, right? The Schumann resonance, exactly what I was thinking.
Although when you look at the methodology for attaining the Schumann resonance, I thought it would be something like, oh, it's the space station records what it, you know, the ambient noise of the whole planet, like, which would be like how I would think they would do it.
Right.
But no, it's something about, like, it's done in Russia, and it's something about they're measuring, like, when I looked into this, it was like they have some rods that are in different places around Russia and everything that measure the electro frequencies that come off of it. So, and then they average that together. So it's more like the sound. They say that it's actually the sound of lightning. It's how many lightning strikes are being are going on the planet per day.
Oh.
I don't know. It's really actually not as scientific as I thought it was, because at first I was like, oh yeah, the Schumann resonance is way up, and you know, all those meditative groups are like, oh, and look, today the Schumann resonance is this and that, and sometimes I feel it too. I'll be like, dude, my ears are ringing, or the air feels weird, or something's off about the energy of everything.
Schumann.
And I'm like, oh, I wonder if it's a Schumann. Yeah, well, I mean, it could be the sound the Earth is making, but I'm just saying the way in which we currently measure it is not that amazing.
Well, it would also be different from than the satellite. So if we had the satellite version, is it the same sound? But, you know, because if those the satellite never landed on any of those planets, it was just circling them, so it picked up the sound. So what does Earth sound like compared to that? I'm sure they recorded that too, no?
Well, and that's the other thing, is that, like, you would think that maybe these planets don't make the same sound all the time. That could just be the sound that it was making when the satellite went by it, which was for a short duration of time. And same thing with Earth. Yeah, so
well, that's true, right? There's different seasons and stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, we definitely should get that would be a cool science experiment, to just have a satellite that only its entire job is just to record the sound of the planets.
Different sounds, yeah, over time. Maybe we'll get to that. I wanted to go back to what you were saying about, like, being a visual person and what that means. And I was thinking of, like, light frequencies, and how every sound really can be translated into a light frequency in some aspect, you know, in the spectrum. So then I was thinking, when you were talking about playing, like, Guitar Hero or whatever, and seeing those things, I was thinking, oh yeah, it's like having those little light things that come up, you're like ding, and you hit the light in between the notes, but also being able to hear the sound in the light form of it. I don't know, it just made me think of
that's interesting, because last night I had I was talking to my friend about how there's, like, cell polarity, which is like how does a cell know like, okay, when you started as an embryo, how does it know to become a leg cell or a foot cell or an organ cell or whatever the cell does? Like, we're all like one little cell at the beginning, and then we become like this human and everything. Like, how does an individual cell, when it's dividing, like, how does it know which assignment to have, right? And there's this thing called cell polarity. But there was some scientist that he was telling me about, who I need to get the book, and I need to find out. I have notes. I take notes now all the time when I talk to people. This was like the Body Electric. It was a book by Becker, some guy named Becker or something. So in the 1980s or 90s, and he basically could get frogs who normally were too old to grow back, like, legs and limbs, or like lizards that don't normally grow back particular tails or whatever. He could get them to regrow limbs by basically doing some sort of electromagnetic frequency towards certain things. So he would figure out what that was, and then he would make them regrow a limb. And it was kind of like research, because he wanted to help, like, veterans grow back arms and stuff like that, but it never got that far. So I really need to look into that book and buy that book. It would be amazing. But so then when he was talking about that, I was like, oh wow. So then when I went to sleep last night, I had this crazy dream, you know, me and my crazy dreams. And it was, I had like a little Scotty, like, Star Trek device, which would be like, you know, oh, sir, we don't do surgeries. Are you cutting on that person? No. And then, you know, they would just, you know, like, put a little device and you were healed. So what it did in my dream, it was like this magnet that spun around, and there was different colored lasers that would go through, like, the the middle of the magnet. So like the frequency of the it's like the magnetic frequency, I don't know, the magnetic pull and the laser light would mix, and both of their energies were used to target an individual cell. But it also could like this little device would be able to tell like what was not in resonant with its like tissue. So for instance, if there was a cancer cell or some sort of cell that was not like the other ones, it could pulsate to it what the frequency that it needed to be in harmony with. So basically, if anything was out of tune, it could retune it. It was just a stupid,
right.
But I mean, I think
don't call that dream stupid at all. That was great. That's so awesome.
But yeah, so it made me kind of think, all right. Well, and of course, you know, I got drawings. So
you got drawings from the dream.
Yeah, because like in the dream, it was also showing me that they were like these dreams. It's like it was like I was in the research and development phase of it too. So when we were trying to figure out, I don't know who we was, but when we were trying to figure out like what a healthy frequency for any given cell would be within, you know, like to get like kind of like a baseline range, because everybody's different. Like it's just like your voice, everybody's voice is different, every voice is the same, but yet you can tell if it's a female voice or a male voice, you know, or a deep voice. Like there's a range in which you're like, oh, you're a soprano, you're a whatever, a baritone. Right. Well, so like basically if you examined a cell in a petri dish, it was already dead. It wasn't connected to the living organism anymore. Yes. It didn't have the life force in it. It was like, we're studying dead science. Like that didn't work. Like we had to get microscopy. We had to get microscopes that like would go in to the body and internally be able to see and use like these lasers and magnets to measure what the ideal frequency was.
Missing. Yeah.
And so like that's how we would figure out like what where your baseline was to even be able to figure out what frequency was needed.
That makes complete sense. That's already been, as far as I understand, it sounds like the strife. I think it's strife now. The rife. Sorry, the rife. It was a rife. The magnifying glass. It was this magnifying glass that did exactly that. And it studied living cells. It was a crazy microscope.
It's about Royal Rife or whatever his name.
Yes.
Oh, I haven't looked into that, but okay.
It's exactly what you're talking about, because it studies living cells, and then there was this. They started studying all these frequencies of being able to like register frequencies of cancer cells or whatever, any kind of cells or any kind of cell, and so it all had a frequency. So if you match the frequency, you would blow up the cell. You can blow up a cancer cell like that, right? Like a tumor. If you match its frequency, it's like a glass that's playing a crystal, and it breaks it because it hits that frequency. And it's the same exact thing. It's like exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of, and I probably had a bunch of preconceived notions about this too from, like, what was that girl's name? Elaine Day Music, or she did the tuning forks, the electric
right, from Vermont.
Yeah, and then there's that Jerry Tinnick guy who also, like, they were saying there's certain frequencies that each cell, like a healthy cell has. Right. Jerry Tinnick guy actually gave it a number where it was like it has to have at least 50 hertz in order to split. Like otherwise it's not healthy enough to split. So I mean, there's something to start on. I do think, you know, just like Rupert Sheldrake talked about, and you know, like a lot of people in this resonance there's something to the energy, like energy within, like we're electric beings, we really are. So there's something to this morphic field, the electromorphic field or whatever.
Yeah. What you were also talking about with your dream a couple of years ago, when I was like convinced that I had breast cancer, and then I had done some tests, and they found like markers for it, and yes, that I had fit into those markers, but I didn't get any like additional test work done. I had this other therapy done. But anyway, while I was really doing a lot of meditation on that, I was visualizing asking each cell to either like transmute back to a healthy cell so that if it was filled with any illness or darkness or whatever, that it should transmute back to the original cell form that's a healthy cell, or that it would just could if it served its purpose, that it wouldn't reproduce and that it would just die, and then my body would flush it out. But yeah, it made me think of that, because it's like those cells were kind of harmonizing with the other frequency that it should be. That's what I was trying to get them to do through meditation.
I mean, in theory, if this is a bit of like a hologram, or if things are programmable, then you should be able, well, like that Wim Hof guy, all right? Like he does all these breathing techniques or whatever, but they can give him, have you looked into Wim Hof? Anyway, like, no. Okay, he's this Scandinavian dude who, his wife like committed suicide, and he was left with a bunch of little kids, and he was like super stressed, and I think he has like 5 or 6 like kids that he had to raise on his own. And he started doing these ice baths, and he started doing these crazy exercises where he would hold his breath in order to control his moods, and like he got control over his entire physical body, right? So now he does, like, there's a really cool app, like a Wim Hof app, and I used it this morning for like some breathing techniques. I guess it's supposed to help build your immune system. So he does a lot of the cold hot therapy, but then he also does a lot of breath work. And what he does is he has this like method where they've given him like really deadly injection diseases, and he will sit there and he will like breathe and talk to his body, and he will dissipate it. They can't get him sick. Like he hasn't been sick in I don't know when. And so he's taken on research, been like, okay, like, and I actually watched him the other day on, I think maybe it was on Russell Brand, or could have been Joe, like he's on the main guys all the time. And he was talking about how like, yeah, I'll take Corona. I'll show you how you can, his entire thing was like, I'll take coronavirus and I'll show you how you can use these techniques within your, like you decide whether or not you want to be sick. Your body is a machine that, you can talk to it, and you can make you can build your immunity, essentially. I don't know. So cool. He's kind of looked at as a kind of
like a
crazy,
guru,
like a, yeah, but I mean, well, yeah, like a guru too, but he does have he has a kind of cool little cult following, and I mean, I like his app.
I'm gonna check him out, definitely.
Yeah,
really
it's
cool.
Like WIMHOF, Wim Hof. So
okay.
Yeah, I'll send you the app when we're done here.
Yeah, I wrote it down. Yeah, well, that's cool. Lots of good stuff. What else came out for this this module? Anything else for you?
I mean, let's see. I liked the Leonardo da Vinci and the Flower of Life. I didn't realize that he was big into that. And then, yeah, I guess like really, I like that Newton even said that the earth resembles a giant animal or vegetable. So reminded me again of, our mundane to the magnificent. And then also that was interesting that he said that from all of Newton's calculations that like the end of us would be 2060.
Oh, I was waiting for that. I was like, all right, well, is he going to do this date? That was the last sentence of.
Yeah, and that was the last sentence. And the day that Isaac Newton thinks the world will end you all is 1960. Oh, okay, cool.
2060.
2060, yeah. Yeah, so what is that? Like 40 years from now. We got time.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, I'll be like 87.
Yeah. Yeah.
Iron.
I'm like, well, I lived my life. Yeah.
It's a good time for it all to go.
Stick around and see.
In my late 80s.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't think he's completely right about that. He was having a hard time finding what he was looking for. He was completely frustrated for not having found the
turning lead into gold.
Turning lead into gold, which is, I think, where everyone gets stuck with alchemy. They get like frustrated about that. But anyway, yeah, I liked the way his little particles were growing, and he related everything to his natural world. What was him studying alchemy was when he came up at the same time as what? What was the big thing that came out? Like at that time he was studying alchemy, and it was the.
Well, I mean, I guess he like always studied alchemy until his death, but like I guess that's when he did the elliptical structures.
Oh, the ellipticals.
Of yes. how the rotation of the planets kind of go around, and then gravity
and the light
calculus
and light.
He had to
Right.
invent calculus so that he could figure out the elliptical.
And I think it was also the light. No, the light.
Yeah,
the white.
It had the light spectrum. He figured out the light spectrum and all that. And then that white was not white. White was the combination of all colors.
Yes, that came out directly from his alchemy.
Yeah, which is really cool.
Yeah, there was a lot about him. He's definitely interesting. I liked the comparison.
Like this is a bro, right? He's in his 20s. He's going through the plague, like Isaac Newton. All of these dudes are, right? Where they're just, I mean, they do wear wigs and they talk to each other like, oh, darling, you know. But at the same time, they were allowed to like just tinker with little stuff, like piddly stuff. It's not like they had to go to a call center and talk to this person for 8 hours for 5 days a week, you know. Like we don't have a society set up where we can just tinker. We don't have tinkers. Like I'm a little Tinkerbell, you know. I totally, if I was in the 1800s, would be like, darling, may I borrow your Bunsen burner? You know, like that would have been like what else you gonna do, right? So I don't know. I feel like we need tinker labs or something.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Well, or whatever it is that you like he was drawn to that. You know, there are other people that make great discoveries in other areas that need a tinker lab in something else.
But it's like we don't have, I mean, you can't get access to microscopes and telescopes and Bunsen burners and, you know, torches and things that can melt metals and cut power tools and all, without paying extremely a lot of money. And there's no centralized place for that. It's all, if you want to get into this one little segmented thing, that's great. Put your money where your mouth is and build it in your garage. Other than that, if you're not at a university, then, you know, good luck to you.
Apprentice.
And when you're at a university, you got 4 years, or you got this little small time frame, and then that's that.
Right, and you got a lot of studies. Yeah, well, I think that's why there are few Isaac Newtons around. You know, there are people that just are able to do that at that level, but there aren't very many of them. Not everybody could be at that level. Doesn't mean that they don't contribute as much. But anyway, yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, he was already tenured or whatever. He was already working in Trinity College and already high ranking, so he probably also just had that. He just had those abilities to have that lab at his house.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he was still privileged. It wasn't like he was like a common folk guy who got to student. Yeah, he was. Yeah. You're right. He was a professor, and he had
to work his way up there. It wasn't like he was just, I'm just gonna be some dude off the street. But anyway,
he was a genius. You know, there was that. But just a little.
Yeah, just a little.
Just a little bit, like, you know.
I know, considering the entire foundation of science is based off of his theories after that. Like everything after that was pretty much, I mean, everything still is. It's Newtonian science. I did like the end for me, just the differences between modern physics and unified physics, just some of the background, just some of the comparisons, which modern physics is there's a flat universe with much dark matter based on 2D math of like flat space, versus unified physics, which is an inseparable quantum interconnectedness as the universe to the fundamental reality. So there were just some differences that I have to read through again in order to really get like, oh yeah, this is why it's different, like what the holographic concept, and then of course Nassim Haramein's contribution of the holofractographic essential, which is the essential interrelatedness of the holographic and fractal nature of the cosmos. So I think that is one of the biggest differences now between modern science versus unified physics. Mm-hmm. Was there anything else with that I don't know, that you can add to?
No, I mean, and I think because that's very similar to like the discussion that they had in the first module, you know, too, about like the differences in the two. I think that this is more just kind of honing in on there's some kind of unified field that we're going to be working with here. So like that's like laying the foundation that this isn't 100% crazy. Like everybody's sort of touched on it before, but and giving sort of like testament to, Nikola Tesla was another big one that they talked about in there, who I love him and I've read a lot of his stuff, but that's the thing, is like his stuff isn't even all, sometimes I just feel like some of this stuff is like fairy tales, because we don't even have access to half of Nikola Tesla's writing.
Read the real stuff, like the actual writings.
Science of it, there's a little bit, but a lot of it's not been declassified. So
right. Well, it's other people have patented it. In addition to, those were his inventions and stuff, but still, a lot of those writings are, you're right, classified.
These Nikola Tesla coils and stuff are apparently, were like wireless energy that could turn on a light bulb from across the room. So they're sending electricity wirelessly, which isn't just waves, like radio waves, or what do you call internet waves? What are internet waves? What is Wi-Fi?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't even know, but whatever that is, so who knows if that's what it was, like if that's what it was connecting. I don't know. I really don't know how our universe works even now.
Well, I don't think many people do. Even really the top physicists don't, like even people that study this all day long and that's their heart and love. Do they really know how it works? Only to a certain degree. It's not much more than we know in the big spec of things.
True. But I guess that is like, that is why, the internet is a beautiful, wonderful place, because you can get a little overview, the school, the University of YouTube, or the University of, Google, or basically like, you can get a pretty good understanding of the basic stuff if you want to on your own account. It's just, it gets like daunting and you're like, oh, and then I have to learn about what thermodynamics and what this, okay.
Right. Well, it's a career, Yeah. It's not just, it's like, take it to the next level. It's pretty good. I forgot about that. Wait, what were you saying about the differences?
Oh, well, I guess like in a way, I guess the point that I didn't loop around back in my thought process was that it's like a little fairy tale, and that we just hear these little baseline stories of these scientists, like, this guy was a genius. He invented the stuff that we don't have now because they took it away from him. But believe me, he was a genius.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Well, we're sorry we killed this person, but that person was a genius too. We're sorry we tortured and killed some people.
We were really assholes back then. Yeah.
But we still are.
It sucks, because if we weren't like that, then we would have much better technology today.
We'd be so much further along.
Thank you.
Well, because it's just like a battle of the egos, or the fear from the church saying that they would lose. That's where it all went back to. It was the church losing power, because then, God forbid, somebody else, they said that consciousness, right? Oh, that was another big difference, that unified science had consciousness as the beginning of everything, or as part of it. It wasn't ever out of the equation. It's always part of the equation, where modern physics was always trying to show it that it wasn't part of the equation, or that it came after somehow.
It's funny too, because like when I say consciousness, I'm like, what is the intelligence that animates my body, like that animates my thought process, that animates anything being alive? That's what I'm talking about, consciousness. But when I talk to some of my more analytical, like scientific friends, they're like, let's just talk about consciousness in terms of something that's awake, that's conscious, versus something that's not, that's like dead or asleep. I'm like, that's not the kind of conscious, like there's more than one kind of consciousness that people even want to talk about. So even within mainstream thinking, it's like, well, no, we're just going to talk about, like, in terms, if we're going to like try building artificial intelligence or something, we'll talk about consciousness in terms of something that is aware at this moment of itself, that it is, in the awake process, it is conscious, versus,
Okay. Yeah, I can see that there is a distinction there. Yeah. Well, right, because a person is sleeping, that doesn't mean that they're not conscious when they're awake, but they're sleeping in that moment. So therefore, maybe they're not conscious of what's happening or aware of themselves in that moment. I don't know. It is a good question. But anyway, I'm with you on the distinction of consciousness is just in is everything. It's that created the spirit, and what is that really separate from me and a dog? Is a dog aware of itself, or is a plant aware of itself? So you're saying that it's not conscious, and maybe it has a different awareness. We can't really analyze what they think.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And like, that's why I always think the hierarchy of thinking your consciousness is better than or somehow superior to another animal or another group of organized matter cells or atoms put together is it's a lot. That's a lot of presumption.
Exactly. Right, because we're only going by what our own intelligence is like so subjective to the way the criteria that we're putting on these other consciousnesses. We don't know. Yeah, I think that's what we'll get into more of, hopefully, in this course.
Yeah,
I'm excited about it.
But yeah, anyway, this is all great food for thought and good stuff to like keep us, thinking about anything besides, just whatever people think about these days.
Yeah.
Quarantining or something. I don't know. So anyway, check out what is it called? The Resonance
Science Foundation, but the course itself, I don't remember the name of it.
That's what I was trying to think. I just know it's the free course that they're offering, and this is the second part module that we looked at today, which was just like sort of like the history of physics and science.
It's called it's the Unified Science Course Virtual Series. They changed the name of it actually, but that's what it says right now. Unified Science Course Virtual Series.
Okay, cool. This was part 2. And join us for more of and discuss stuff with us if you want to be like, what, or like which one was your favorite person that you wanted, whatever. Like if you want to take it with us, this is cool. Let's do it.
Right. Or if you have other insights, definitely. Yeah. We'll see you for module 3.
Bye.
Bye.